my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy Friday or Saturday, depending on what time this video actually gets uploaded. I've had some technical difficulties with my phone this week and everything's sorted now, but it definitely pushed me back a little ways as far as getting my video edited. So I apologize for the lateness. And it didn't help that I took one of my simple projects and turned it into a relatively difficult one. I like to do that to myself, make things more difficult than they really need to be sometimes. For the projects for today, I decided to focus on things that I thought would be good gifts. So I grabbed some boxes that I have had sitting around in my kitchen. I have so many, and I took 3 of them and I redid them for today's video. And one is a jewelry box, one is kind of a little trinket box, and then one is a handmade box that's shaped like an octagon. So they're all different and they're really kind of neat, and I love how they all turned out. I hope you guys do too. And without further ado, let's get to my projects for today's video. My first of the 3 boxes is this little cedar chest that I've had in my kitchen for quite a while now. And I kind of went in a different direction with this than I normally do, and I am painting this pink. More specifically, I'm using the DIY color curated by Jamie Ray Vintage called Vintage Pink. And this paint has a built-in sealer, which is great. So that means no big top or wax is necessary. However, it is a little bit thinner and it took a couple more coats than the regular DIY paint. So I ended up having to go over this box 4 times with the paint. Thankfully, it's a small box. Then there was a little crack in the bottom. I filled that with some wood putty, and then I decided to decoupage the bottom just to cover up that crack. So I went ahead and painted the bottom with a coat of DIY's White Swan. Then I measured the inside of the box so that I could cut out the proper amount of decoupage paper. For this, I'm using a decoupage paper by Redesign with Prima called Newsprint. So I cut out the portion I wanted to use on the bottom, and I started on one side with some of the liquid patina, the clear liquid patina, laid the paper down just on that one side, smoothed it out, went over it with another coat of the liquid patina, and then moved on to the next section of the bottom of the box. Once I had the paper completely down in the bottom of the box, I went over the entire thing with another coat of the liquid patina. Then it was on to sanding. Now I had a couple of runs in a couple places, so I went ahead and sanded this. And while I was at it, I did go ahead and do some light distressing. The thing with this paint is, since it has the built-in sealer, wet distressing is not an option. So sanding is necessary. So once I was done with my distressing, I washed everything back up again, and then it was time to move on to my next step. For this piece, I had already picked out a transfer that I wanted to use. It was actually the inspiration for the color that I chose, and this is called Wild Amorous. It's by Redesign with Prima. So I cut out the butterflies and began to lay my transfer down. I like to start by doing one side, especially if there's anything that goes over the edge, and get those pieces laid down first. In this case, I'm just rubbing them in with my fingernail, and then I just went over the entire transfer with that transfer stick, rubbing it down into the paint, and then slowly removing that piece of vellum. I just worked my way around the piece, making sure that all of my transfer was adhered before I lifted the vellum off, and then just rubbed that transfer down with that stick and made sure that it was all in place. And then once I was done with that, I took my piece of vellum and I burnished in my transfer. And what that does is kind of removes any halos that there might be, and just make sure that your transfer is seated very well into your paint. Now I did decide to go ahead and put a little latch on the front of this. So I grabbed one that I have in my stash and just made a couple holes, starter holes for the screws, and then screwed this little latch on. It's kind of an antiqued bronze. I thought it was a good touch for this piece. Then I went ahead and added a few of the butterflies just for a little more interest. I thought they were just cute. And so I put a couple around the transfer. Once I had my little butterflies down and I was happy with how everything looked, I went ahead and put a coat of Big Top over the entire lid of this piece to protect that transfer. Now, admittedly, pink and purple aren't usually my first go-tos, but I love how this little piece came together. My second box is this cute little jewelry box. Now, I apologize. My phone and I are fighting right now. And for some reason, it took away the footage that I had of this box before I got started on it. So you could have seen what color it was, but it was just a really, really dark brown. And I am painting this with DIY's Crinoline. This, since it was so dark, I did have to go over it with 3 coats of the Crinoline paint. But once I was done with that, I was pretty happy with how it looked. Now it had a little glass insert, so I went ahead and painted that with 2 even coats of Crinoline on both sides as well. Then I sealed one side with Big Top and set it aside. Then it was on to distressing my piece. I used wet distress method for this because it was just the regular DIY paint, so super easy to distress that with just a little bit of water. And I just went around the whole box and brought back a little bit of that wood tone and some of that detail. Then it was time to seal my paint. Now, the regular DIY paint does need to be sealed, so for this I chose wax. And I'm simply using a soft bristle brush to apply the wax, and I just kind of dab it into the wax and then brush it onto the piece and then wipe back any excess with a shop towel. It's a relatively simple procedure. I was trying to be really careful not to get any wax on the little velvet that was inside this box. I didn't want to have any stains, so that was a little bit scary, but I managed to get it done without making a mess, thankfully. Then I decided I wanted to give this a little bit more aged look and a little bit more patina, so I went over it with a coat of DIY's dark wax. Now, I like to thin my wax down just a little bit with mineral spirits, my dark wax, and so I keep a little bit of mineral spirits on hand, and I'll dip my brush in that and then dab it into the dark wax, and then it goes on a little bit more thinly and it's a little easier to wipe off. It's also a little easier to work with, especially when you're going into small areas like that. Then I worked it into all of that little detail that was on this piece, again using my hand to try and make sure that nothing splattered inside onto that velvet. Once I was finished dark waxing the entire box, I went ahead and grabbed the piece of glass that goes inside and I waxed the part that would be facing the inside of the box just so that it would match the rest of the box. Then for the top side that would be facing out, I grabbed this beautiful decoupage paper by Roycycled called Vintage Wallpaper, and I cut out the piece that I needed, gave it a little spritz of water, put down a coat of liquid patina, just a starter strip on the one side, put my paper down, and then slowly worked my way across the piece of glass, adding a little bit of liquid patina and then brushing my paper into place, and then a little coat of liquid patina on the top. Once I had the piece completely covered with the paper and there weren't any wrinkles, I set it aside to dry. Once it was completely dry, I took some sandpaper and went around the piece of glass and in a downward motion sanded the excess paper off. I don't know what was going on with my phone here. I'm so sorry for the picture. But then once that was done, it was time to put my box back together. So I laid that piece of glass down and added my holders back in. And I absolutely love this little box. I think it's so cute. recently picked up this box on a thrift haul, and I knew immediately that I wanted to make it beautiful. It's handmade, and I just wanted to do something fun with it. Honestly, I went a little overboard with this piece, but I had some fun. So I started by taking it apart and setting the glass and the insert aside, and then painted the inside and the outside with one coat of DIY's little black dress. Now, the beautiful thing about coloring this lighter wood with a dark color like this is that it only took one coat of paint for the whole thing, which was great. I love DIY paint for a lot of reasons. It's an all natural paint. It's no VOC. You can use it inside. It's very, very highly pigmented, and it goes on just super smooth and beautiful. I just love it. Once the paint was done and dry, it was time for distressing. Now, I know some people don't like distressing, which is fine. You can always just skip this step, but I wanted to bring back just a little bit of that wood tone from underneath this dark paint. Once I was happy with my distressing and the piece was dry again, it was time to seal my paint. And for this one, I decided to go with DIY's Big Top. Big Top is a great sealer. It's very durable. It's easy to apply, just brush it on, and it does dry to a little bit of a sheen. So it's not completely matte. And for this piece, that was fine. I did grab that insert and I painted both the top and the bottom with little black dress, and then I sealed it with Big Top as well. So for this, I had already decided to use a decoupage paper by Redesign with Prima called Dark Floral. And normally I would paint something white when I'm decoupaging. However, I felt like this fabric, this paper, looked better over a black background. So I went ahead and traced out what I needed, cut my piece of paper out, and then I used liquid patina as usual to lay this paper out. Now, the one thing I will say with these fibrous papers like this, the decoupage papers by Redesign, they are a little bit more like fabric, and so you definitely need a thicker layer of the liquid patina as you are laying this down, and then a nice thick layer over the top as well, just to make sure that you don't end up having any bubbles and that nothing peels back or loosens on you. Once that was done and I had my piece completely laid down and a nice good coat of the patina over the top, I went ahead and made this way more difficult on myself than I really needed to, and decided I would put the decoupage paper on the inside of this box as well. So I did my best to measure out the piece, and I used my fingernails and a pen to just kind of push it into the corners and give myself a crease to cut. And so I just cut it off to where I needed it and then laid it down with the liquid patina as well. And I did do this to all the little sections of the inside of this box. And since I like to make my life even more difficult than it needs to be sometimes, I decided to go ahead and make some castings with the mold called Delicate Flora by Redesign with Prima, and use those around the edge of this box. So I made several castings and then I painted them all with little black dress, being really careful to get into all the little grooves because the last thing I wanted was some white shining through once I was done. And then as they were drying, I went ahead and sanded off the little bit of excess paper from the insert for the top of the box. For this, I'm just using a pretty heavy grit sandpaper. I think it's a 120 grit sandpaper. Then I cleaned up my glass so that I could get this part out of the way and put the top of the box kind of back together again. So I laid that clean glass over the insert, laid it back down into the lid of the box, and then put the staples back in place so that it's held where it needs to be. Now I'd also decided that I wanted to add a knob to the top of the lid on this box. And so I grabbed my measuring tape and measured the top section of the box just so that I could figure out where center was. And then I drilled a little hole and I attached a knob that I had kind of sitting around in my kitchen. Then it was back to my castings, and I wanted to go ahead and seal them so they would have the same sheen as the rest of the box. So I'm using DIY's Big Top for that. Once the Big Top was dry, I went ahead and grabbed some Decor wax by Redesign with Prima, and this one's called Eternal. It's a really pretty burnished gold, and I used my fingertip to apply that to all of the detail on these beautiful little castings to really make them shine. I also added some to the knob so that everything would match. Then it was time to place my castings and get them glued down. And for that, I am just using Titebond Quick and Thick. And I am kind of dabbing that onto the back of these. I really didn't want to place them down and have that glue mush out from the bottom of these. So I'm being really careful to just add a nice thin coat and tapping that onto the back of the castings, gently placing them where I want them and then pressing them down into the paint. Once I worked my way around the box and all my castings had been glued down, I am finally finished with this little treasure box. And even though it was a lot of work, I am so happy I put in the effort because I'm absolutely in love with how this little box came out. Guys think of my projects for today. I hope you liked them. If you did, and if you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. If you haven't already, I would love it if you think about subscribing to my channel, and then just hit that little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And also let me know if you have a favorite of the boxes. I think for me, it's probably the black one, just because I did put so much into that little box. And then also, just to remind you, the DIY products that you saw me use today can be purchased through my website at www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com, listed in the description box below. I also carry Redesign with Prima products, not the ones that I used today, unfortunately. Most of those have been in my stash for quite some time at this point, but I do have quite a nice selection of Redesign products on my website, as well as Decoupage papers by Roycycled and Sweet Pickins milk paint. So check all those out there. For Tuesday's video, I hope you did like today's projects, because chances are I've got another box or another batch of boxes for Tuesday's video. I just kind of want, like I said, to have some giftables sitting around in the cottage, things that would make pretty little presents for the Christmas tree. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and I hope you will join me here for Tuesday's video. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. See you Tuesday. Bye.